Before we begin, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if you enjoy emotional stories with sharp plot twists, rich versus poor tension, and justice served, hit like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means everything. Now, let's start today's story. In downtown Chicago, inside a glass tower that pierced the clouds, a single sentence from an immigrant intern would silence the most feared man in modern finance. Not his lawyers, not his analysts, not his board. A 24-year-old on a temporary badge, the kind of person executives walk past without learning her name. Because that night at a private investor dinner, Billionaire CEO Grant Wexler decided to entertain himself by humiliating the newest intern in the room. He expected nervous laughter. He expected apology. He expected a girl who would shrink. What he got was a calm voice and a truth that landed like a hammer. The dinner took place at Orpheum, a members-only restaurant hidden above the Chicago Riverwalk. Velvet booze, candlelight, and security that scanned more than faces. On the guest list were names that move markets. Hedge fund founders, a senator's aide, 2 tech CEOs, and the man at the center of the table, Grant Wexler. Grant was 34, self-made in the way the world loves to argue about. He'd built Wexler Meridian from a scrappy trading startup into a powerhouse with algorithms that predicted panic before it happened. To the public, he was a visionary. To the industry, he was a storm warning. When Grant walked into a room, people straightened their backs the way they did when a judge entered court. Not because he yelled, because he didn't have to. Tonight, Grant's executive assistant had insisted on bringing an intern to observe. Pipeline optics, fresh eyes, corporate phrases that meant nothing until they mattered. So she sat at the far end of the table, laptop closed, hands folded, listening. Her name on the badge read, Naya Shah. The font was too big, the lanyard too cheap, the kind of badge that screamed temporary. Naya wasn't supposed to speak. She was supposed to watch, take notes, and be grateful. She was supposed to be invisible, which, in her experience, was the safest way to survive. She'd come to U.S. from South Asia on a student visa, then clawed her way through scholarships, night shifts, and internships that paid in experience. Her accent still caught on certain words. Her confidence didn't. Halfway through the appetizers, Grant flicked his gaze down the table like a laser and decided the evening needed a joke. He raised his glass, leaned back, and smiled at Naya the way a cat smiled at a bird. "Hey, intern," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll have investment advice with a side of sparkling water." Soft laughter rippled through the group. Polite, automatic, the laughter of people who didn't want to become the next target. Naya's supervisor, a managing director named Scott Mallory, shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't stop it. Naya looked up slowly, not startled, not embarrassed, just present. "Sir," she said evenly, "we don't serve advice, but if you're asking seriously, I can answer." The laughter thinned, uncertain. Grant blinked once, like he hadn't expected her to respond in full sentences. "It was a joke," he said, tapping his phone against the table. "But since you volunteered, if you had $1 million, where would you put it in today's market?" It wasn't a question. It was a trap dressed as entertainment. If she gave a timid answer, he'd smirk. If she gave a bold answer, he'd shred it. And if she refused, he'd frame it as incompetence. Naya didn't look at her supervisor. She didn't look at the guests. She didn't look at the cameras she knew were hidden in the corners of rooms like this, quietly documenting everything important people did. She looked directly at Grant Wexler, and her very first words were so calm, so specific, that the entire table stopped breathing. "First," she said, "I wouldn't invest $1 million until I know why you have it." The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was stunned. Grant's smile froze in place. A senator's aide lowered his fork. Someone's ice clinked, the only sound in the air. Naya continued, like she'd just stated the weather. "Because the right strategy depends on your timeline, your liquidity needs, your risk tolerance, and whether that money has a job beyond making more money." Grant set his phone face down, without realizing he'd done it. "Okay," he said slowly, interest sharpening. "Assume it's mine. Assume I want growth. Assume I don't like losing. Then diversify it." Naya said, but not the way your team probably does. A few people chuckled nervously again, but the laughter didn't survive her next sentence. Your team is likely crowding into the same safe trades everyone else is crowding into, which is why they're not safe anymore. Grant leaned forward. His voice lost a mockery and gained something colder. Focus. Explain. Naya inhaled, measured. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of being the only one in the room without power. But she also felt the familiar rhythm of analysis, like stepping into a language her brain spoke fluently. I'd allocate 40% into emerging market infrastructure funds tied to energy transition, she said. Not the obvious ones. 30% into mid-cap value in sectors punished by narrative cycles. Industrial automation, logistics software, non-glamorous healthcare. 20% into municipal bonds, not because they're exciting, but because tax efficiency is a weapon. 10% stays liquid for opportunistic buys when volatility spikes. Grant stared at her. No one spoke. Then he exhaled, sharp. That's surprisingly specific. It's also basic, Naya replied. If you're actually in markets. Someone made a small sound, half a cough, half a laugh. Grant didn't laugh. He studied her like she was a dataset that didn't fit his model. Where did you learn that? From making mistakes with money I didn't have, she said simply. That answer, more than the numbers, hit differently. Because it sounded like experience, not textbook. Grant's eyes narrowed. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. 5 minutes. I'm curious. Scott Mallory's face tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No one contradicted Grant Wexler. I'm an intern, Naya said. I'm not here to advise executives. You're here to learn, Grant replied. So teach me something. The table watched like it was a sport. Naya's pulse thudded, but her voice stayed steady. Emerging markets, Grant pressed. Why? Naya glanced at the other guests. Because Western markets overprice certainty, she said. An underpriced necessity. Meaning everyone wants to buy the same future story, she explained. But in developing nations, the future isn't branding. It's survival. Power grids, transport water systems, energy access. Governments will bend rules to fund it. Regulatory risk, a guest muttered. Corruption. Yes, Naya said. Risk is real. That's why you don't go blind. You look for incentives aligned with ROI. Tax credits, multilateral guarantees, reforms tied to funding. You structure exposure. You don't romanticize it. Grant's eyes widened slightly, not because he'd never heard these concepts, because he didn't expect them from her. When the dinner ended, Grant stood and buttoned his jacket. Most people would have seen the moment as over. Grant didn't. Grant never let a pattern go without squeezing it until it revealed the truth. He slid a card across the table. Not a business card, a private number card. Then he spoke quietly enough that only she heard. You're hiding, he said, and you're smarter than your badge suggests. Naya's throat tightened. I'm an intern, she repeated, as if the label could protect her. Interns don't talk like that, Grant said. Not unless they've lived it. He left, but he didn't leave her alone. By morning, a secure message landed on Grant's phone. Background check on Naya Shah. Immigration records. School records. Intern paperwork. Clean. Clean in a way that felt engineered. Grant frowned. Nobody was that clean by accident. Naya, meanwhile, stared at an email on her cracked phone. Her scholarship appeal had been denied. Rent was due. Her visa clock was ticking. She had done everything right and still couldn't breathe. So when Grant's private number stared back at her from the card, it didn't look like temptation. It looked like oxygen. At exactly 2:59 p.m. the next day, she stepped into the lobby of Wexler Meridian's headquarters, a fortress of glass and quiet judgment. Security scanned her ID twice. A receptionist in a charcoal suit looked her up and down, eyes lingering on her thrifted blazer. Can I help you? I'm here to see Grant Wexler, Naya said. 3 o'clock. The receptionist's eyebrows rose. Do you have an appointment? Naya nodded once. The receptionist checked the schedule and blinked. You're on his calendar. An older man with silver hair approached. His expression was tight, professional. Ethan Carver, he introduced himself. Mr. Wexler's chief of staff. Follow me. Ethan didn't shake her hand. He didn't smile. He walked as if leading her through territory she had no right to breathe in. When they reached Grant's corner office, Ethan stepped inside first. Through the glass, Naya saw Grant listening, brow furrowed, then looking up and meeting her gaze. He waved her in. Naya, Grant said, standing. Thank you for coming. Up here, in his natural habitat, he seemed even more imposing than at dinner. The view behind him was the city, the river, the grid of streets, all of it like a map he owned. His suit looked like it cost more than Naya made in a year. His calm was the calm of a man used to winning. Your chief of staff doesn't approve, Naya said, deciding honesty was safer than pretending comfort. Grant's mouth twitched. Ethan doesn't approve of most things. It's why I keep him around. He leaned back in his chair. I looked into you, he said. Basic background. Naya's spine tightened. Did you? Nothing invasive, Grant added. Like that made it better. But it doesn't explain you. I read. Naya said. Grant shook his head. What you said at dinner wasn't memorized. It was lived. He pressed a button. A wall panel slid open to reveal a massive display, a list of pre-IPO opportunities across Southeast Asia and South Asia, each with projections, risk models, and internal memos. I want a fresh perspective, he said. My team is split. Half says invest heavily. Half says run. What do you say? Naya stood and stepped closer to the screen. She requested the keyboard. Grant nodded. As she typed, the world narrowed. She pulled up satellite imagery, import logs, energy consumption records, vendor invoices, local regulatory filings. Data didn't care about reputation. Data didn't care about accents. Data told the truth if you knew how to listen. Minutes passed. Grant didn't interrupt. Ethan watched through the glass like a man waiting for her to fail. Finally, Naya stepped back and pointed. These three are strong, she said. This one is inflated by narrative. This one is overpriced. Then she tapped a polished, renewable startup with gorgeous branding and perfect headlines. And this one, she said, voice firm, is a sophisticated fraud. Grant's posture changed instantly. Explain. Naya zoomed in. Their growth curve is too smooth. Real growth has scars. She pulled up facility data, and their reported output would require around 40% more energy than their sites consume. Grant's eyes locked on the numbers. His jaw tightened, because she was right. How did my team miss that? He asked, voice low. Because they trusted the story, Naya said. I didn't. Grant stared at her like she'd moved the ground beneath him. You just saved me from a 9-figure mistake, he said. Naya felt a flush of validation and immediately pushed it down. Vindication was addictive and dangerous. Grant stepped closer. Don't go back to the internship program, he said abruptly. Excuse me? I want you on an exclusive contract, Grant said. Consulting. Remote. Confidential. 7 figures. Naya's breath caught. 7 figures wasn't just money. It was oxygen for her whole life. It was tuition, rent, a stable visa path, her mother's medical bills back home, everything she carried in silence. No, she said, even as her mind screamed yes. Grant's eyes narrowed. Why not? Naya swallowed. Because being publicly associated with you or any major financial firm could destroy me. Grant studied her. Are you running from something illegal? No, Naya said quickly. I've never broken the law. Are you in danger? The concern behind the question shocked her more than the question itself. I made enemies, she said finally. Powerful ones. It's better if I stay invisible. Grant's voice turned practical. Then we keep you invisible. Contract under pseudonym. No press. No public appearances. Private workspaces. Naya hesitated, hunger and fear wrestling in her chest. Everything in writing, she said. Ironclad confidentiality. Remote work. Grant's slow smile returned. So it's a yes. It's a conditional maybe, Naya corrected. Good, he said. I love conditional maybes. 2 weeks later, the money had done what money did best. It bought Naya oxygen. She paid her tuition deposit. She moved into a safer apartment. She slept without nightmares of overdraft alerts. But the work did something deeper. It made her feel like herself again. Grant kept his promises. She was NS on internal documents, a reclusive consultant only a handful of executives met. In those 2 weeks, she flagged 2 fraud schemes and dismantled a fintech pitch with a single question the founders couldn't answer. Then, during an acquisition meeting, the pressure snapped. Ethan Carver stood in front of Grant's executive team and dropped the file onto the table like a gavel. "Your consultant only exists as of 3 years ago," Ethan said. "Before that, nothing. No credit history. No employment trail. No social presence. She's either a false identity or she erased herself." Murmurs filled the room. Naya's skin went cold. Grant's gaze turned lethal. "Meeting adjourned," he said. "Everyone out. Ethan, stay. Naya, stay." When the door closed, the air felt heavier. "Is he right?" Grant asked quietly. "Did you appear out of nowhere 3 years ago?" Naya could have lied, but the lie was already dying. "Yes," she said. Grant nodded slowly. "I suspected." "It's not your business," Naya snapped, fear turning to anger. "My past has nothing to do with my work." "It does if it puts my firm at risk," Grant said. "Are you a spy?" "No." "Are you running from a crime?" "No." "Then what?" Naya stood, grabbing her bag. "I'm leaving." Grant didn't move. His next word stopped her mid-step. "I know who you are," he said. "Aisha Rahman." Naya froze. Her real name, a name she hadn't heard in years, slid through the air like a blade. Former quantitative analyst at East Bridge Partners, Grant continued, specialized in cross-border flows and emerging markets. Her knees weakened. Grant's face was unreadable. "You were blamed for an insider trading ring," he said. "Then you disappeared before the investigation closed." Naya's voice cracked. "How long have you known?" "I suspected after the dinner," Grant admitted. "Confirmed last week." Betrayal hit her like heat. "You hired me knowing that." "I hired you because you're exceptional," he said, "and because the official story never made sense." The truth she'd held like poison rose in her throat. "I was framed," she said, "by my mentor and his son." Years ago, she'd been a rising star at East Bridge Partners in Boston, the immigrant success story people loved to post on corporate pages. Her mentor, Harold Eastman, treated her like a prodigy. His son, Lucas Eastman, treated her like an acquisition. Charm, gifts, promises. And then engagement. When Aisha discovered irregularities in cross-border trades, shell companies' front accounts, strangely timed options, she did what she thought was right. She confronted Lucas privately. He begged for time. He swore he loved her. He swore he would fix it. The next morning, regulators raided the firm, and every trail led to her. Her credentials on authorization forms she'd never seen. Accounts in her name she'd never opened. A perfect narrative. Immigrant analysts hungry for wealth, exploiting inside information. Her mentor wept in public about betrayal. Her fiancé stood beside him, devastated. And Aisha realized, too late, that she'd handed them the blueprint to destroy her. They froze her assets. Her visa status collapsed. Her name became poison. Even friends stopped replying. So she vanished. New city, new name, a life built from scraps and silence. Grant listened without interrupting, jaw tight. "So you didn't run because you were guilty," he said finally. "You ran because you were alone." Aisha's chest ached. She blinked hard. "I couldn't prove it," she whispered. "They erased everything." Grant moved to the window, staring at the city like he was mapping a war. "Maybe they didn't erase everything," he said. "People like that are creatures of habit. They do it again." He turned back, eyes sharp. "What if we prove your innocence?" Aisha laughed bitterly. "After 3 years? Impossible." "Not impossible," Grant said. "Just difficult. And expensive. Good thing I'm rich." She should have been offended. Instead, fragile hope surfaced, dangerous, because it meant you wanted to believe again. If we do this, she said carefully, no one can know. Not Ethan. Not your executives. No one. Grant nodded once. Agreed. He extended his hand. Partners. Aisha hesitated, then took it. By day, she continued as NS, reviewing deals. By night, she and Grant turned one corner of his penthouse into an investigation room. Timelines on whiteboards, transaction graphs, names connected by string like a crime map. Patterns emerged. 3 other analysts at Eastbridge had suffered similar scandals after raising questions. All eliminated, all professionally destroyed. Aisha stared at the files, sorrow and fury mixing in her throat. This was a playbook, she whispered. We're going to break it, Grant said. But they still needed concrete proof. Emails, recordings, compliance notes. A smoking gun that tied Harold and Lucas directly to the frame. Then Grant's phone rang late one evening. He answered, listened, and his face changed. It's Ethan, he said. Put it on speaker. Ethan's voice was tense. Lucas Eastman called. He wants to meet you tomorrow. Says he has a partnership proposal in Southeast Asia. Aisha's blood turned to ice. Grant kept his voice neutral. Schedule it. There's more, Ethan said. He asked about your consultant, the one with the remarkable insights. Aisha's breath caught. Grant's gaze locked with hers. Tell him our consulting arrangements are confidential, Grant said evenly. Good night, Ethan. When the call ended, the room fell silent. They suspect, Aisha whispered. They're fishing, Grant replied. If they had proof, they wouldn't ask politely. Aisha began pacing, panic rising. I should disappear again. Grant stepped into her path, hands on her shoulders, grounding her. Running is what they expect, he said. We do the opposite. His voice dropped, fierce and calm. I'm not letting them erase you twice. The next day, Lucas Eastman arrived at Wexel Meridian on time. Expensive suit, perfect smile, confidence dressed as warmth. Grant greeted him like a colleague, not an enemy, from a secure adjacent room. Aisha listened to a live feed, headset tight on her ears. Lucas spoke about synergy, about shared strengths, about unlocking value in emerging markets. But beneath the words, Aisha heard the real message. I'm here to see if you're hiding her. Halfway through the meeting, Lucas leaned back casually and said, Do you remember Aisha Rahman? Such a shame. Brilliant mind. Terrible choices. Aisha's stomach twisted. Grant raised an eyebrow. Vaguely. Insider trading scandal. Engaged to me, Lucas said smoothly. It was devastating. Grant's tone stayed neutral. Sound like a breach of trust. Accountability matters, Lucas replied, smile thin. As Lucas presented his proposal, Aisha read the draft terms on screen. Her fingers tightened. It was a trap. Clauses granting Eastbridge access to Wexel Meridian's algorithmic systems and client metadata. A data mining operation disguised as partnership. He wants your systems, Aisha whispered into Grant's earpiece. He's hunting. Grant kept smiling, asking questions that revealed nothing. When Lucas left, Grant joined Aisha in the monitoring room. He's suspicious, Aisha said. He's testing you. Good, Grant replied. Then we use it. He said like a man placing a chess piece. We accept the partnership with modifications, Grant said. Then we use their access to access theirs. Aisha stared. That's dangerous. High risk, high reward, Grant said. We need evidence. This gets us inside. Eastbridge's annual charity gala was scheduled the following month, a glittering event in Boston, where old money and new tech wore tuxedos, and called it philanthropy. If Wexel Meridian became a partner, they'd be invited, and if they were invited, they could get close to the archives. Aisha hated the plan the moment she heard it, because it required her to be visible, to walk into a room full of people who remember the shape of her old life. They'll recognize me, she insisted. They won't, Grant said. People see what they expect. Nobody expects Aisha Rahman to walk in on my arm. He was right, and that was the terrifying part, because the plan wasn't just strategy. It was theater. If anything feels wrong, you abort, Grant said quietly. Your safety matters more than any proof. The sincerity in his voice made Aisha's chest ache. She nodded. For the first time in years, trust felt possible. The Boston Gala transformed a historic museum atrium into a cathedral of wealth. Marble floors, string quartet, champagne that cost more than Aisha's first semester of grad school. Grant arrived in a black tux, effortless. Aisha arrived beside him in a midnight gown chosen to make her unrecognizable. Hair darker, cut differently, makeup heavier, posture more commanding. Quick question, the narrator voice in your head might ask. Would you have the courage to walk into the lion's den like this? Comment below. Would you go or would you run? Across the room, Aisha saw Lucas Eastman, and beside him, Harold Eastman, the man who called her prodigy and then helped bury her. Harold approached, smiled polite and predatory. Grant Wexler, he boomed, welcome. And this must be your brilliant consultant. Aisha met his gaze with controlled calm. Mr. Eastman, she said, your reputation precedes you. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly. And yours is remarkably difficult to verify, he said, almost as if you appeared out of nowhere. Grant smiled. The best talent often does. Lucas lingered, gaze fixed on Aisha. You seem familiar, he said softly. Have we met? Aisha smiled thinly. I avoid public events, she said. Tonight is an exception. Lucas's stare sharpened, searching her face for memory. Aisha kept her expression smooth, heart-hammering. Grant guided her away, hand at the small of her back, protective, possessive, part of the act. The chemistry wasn't entirely acting anymore, and that realization was its own kind of danger. 5 minutes later, Grant created his distraction, a stage spill, a loud apology, a commotion near the donor wall. While the crowd turned, Aisha slipped into the service corridor. She moved fast, using a security pass Grant had obtained through reasonable means she didn't ask about. A service elevator took her to the executive level. The hallway smelled like carpet and power. At the end, an unmarked door waited. Harold Eastman's private office. Aisha typed the code. The lock clicked. She entered. Inside, old-world arrogance lived in mahogany. Heavy desk, framed awards, photographs of Harold shaking hands with presidents. Aisha went straight to the bookcase, pressed a hidden latch, and revealed a small server room humming with secrets. She plugged an extraction drive Grant had given her, designed to pull archive compliance folders and private communications. While it ran, she searched the desk. Harold was old school. He kept physical backups. In the bottom drawer, beneath benign memos, she found a locked metal case. Her hands trembled as she picked the lock, a skill learned not from crime, but from survival. Inside were USB drives labeled by date. One date made her stomach drop. 3 days before she'd been destroyed. She pocketed it, checked the extraction. 90%. 7 minutes left. Then voices in the corridor. Security. Footsteps stopped at the door. The handle turned. Aisha's mind ran through escape routes. None were good. And then, in the distance, a crash of glass and shouting. Grant's distraction escalated. Right on cue. The handle released. The guards moved on. Aisha didn't breathe until the footsteps faded. Extraction complete. She pulled the drive, wiped traces, and slipped out. Back in the gala. Grant was at the center of attention, apologizing to a donor, charisma on full display. Aisha approached from a different angle, as planned. Done, she whispered. Relief flashed across Grant's face. Then we leave, he said. As they moved toward the exit, Lucas intercepted them. Leaving so soon? He asked, smile sharp. Grant answered smoothly. Lucas's gaze locked on Aisha. I swear we've met, he murmured. Aisha returned his stare. In another life, she said. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes. Recognition, uncertainty, threat. Then he released her hand. Until next time, he said. In the car, Aisha finally exhaled. Her hands shook. Grant reached across and held her hand. You did it, he said quietly. You faced them. The words cracked something inside her. She had been running for years. Tonight, she had walked into the fire. The next morning, they reviewed the data. The evidence was worse and better than they dared to hope. Emails from Lucas to Harold. Instructions to fabricate authorizations under Aisha's credentials. Messages of compliance. Containment procedures for internal threats. A memo outlining how to create a plausible narrative around an immigrant analyst exploiting inside information. Then an audio file. Harold's voice, "She knows too much." Lucas's voice, "I'll handle Aisha. By the time I'm finished, no one will believe her." Aisha sat very still. For years she had lived with a question. What if I'm wrong? The recording answered it with cruelty. Grant's jaw tightened. "We build an airtight case," he said. "We hit them from every angle at once." Grant's lawyers assembled the evidence, confirmed chain of custody, and worked with investigators to ensure the case couldn't be dismissed as corporate retaliation. They submitted it simultaneously to federal investigators, regulators, and a handful of journalists known for careful work. They didn't just accuse. They proved. The fallout was immediate. Eastbridge Partners stock plunged as headlines erupted. Federal agents raided their offices. Whistleblowers came forward. Analysts who had been silenced, threatened, bought, discarded. Lucas Eastman was indicted on securities fraud, obstruction, and witness tampering. Harold Eastman followed, and the narrative that had crushed Aisha's life snapped in half. 3 months later, Aisha stood in Grant's Chicago office watching live footage of Lucas being escorted out of his townhouse in handcuffs. Cameras flashed. A man who had once destroyed her with a smile now blinked under floodlights like he'd never seen the sun. "How does it feel?" Grant asked softly. Aisha swallowed. "I stinging. Like I can breathe." Grant's hand found hers, fingers interlacing naturally. "Your name is yours again," he said. Aisha turned to him. "And yours?" she asked. "What does Grant Wexel want now?" He smiled, softer than she'd ever seen him. "I want to build something that doesn't depend on fear," he said, "with someone who refuses to be invisible." Aisha laughed, shaky and real. "For the record," she said, "you were insufferable the night we met." Grant raised an eyebrow. "I was testing the room." "You were mocking the intern," Aisha corrected. Grant winced theatrically. "Fair." Aisha stepped closer, voice lowering. "And for the record, I didn't call because I wanted your money. I called because I was drowning." Grant held her gaze. "I know," he said, "and I'm glad you did." The space between them closed. Not like a strategy, not like a deal, but like two people recognizing something real in a world that rarely allowed it. And if you're still here, comment one word: justice. Because this story isn't just about markets. It's about what happens when someone powerful underestimates the person they think is invisible, and that invisible person decides to speak. Like, comment, and subscribe, because we got more stories coming where courage wins and truth hits back. See you in the next one. But that wasn't the end of the storm. Because the truth is, after you've been framed once, you don't suddenly feel safe just because you have evidence. You still flinch when your phone buzzes. You still check over your shoulder when a black car slows down at the curb. And you still wake up at 3 a.m. thinking, what if they find a new way to ruin me? So even as Grant's legal team went to work, Aisha kept living in two worlds. By day, she was an S, the anonymous consultant whose files arrived without a face attached. She sat at her small kitchen table with 2 laptops, a legal pad, and a mug that said, "World's okayest intern," a joke her roommate had bought before the internship ended and her life exploded again. On the other side of the apartment wall, the city sirens rose and fell like breathing. By night, she became the person she used to be, the analyst who could smell a lie in a spreadsheet, who could see intent in numbers the way other people saw weather patterns. Grant's penthouse study turned into their war room, timelines on whiteboards, transaction maps, names circled in marker. Every time they discovered another link, Aisha felt the old wound open and a new strength form around it. Comment below. The narrator voice would ask, have you ever had to rebuild your life from zero? Because Aisha wasn't just rebuilding. She was doing it while being hunted. Aisha's new apartment was better than the one she'd had as an intern, but it still wasn't safe in her mind. She didn't hang photos. She didn't keep letters. She didn't build roots. Not because she didn't want to, because she'd learned that roots gave people something to tear out. And she had more than fear riding on this. Her immigration status had been a knife at her throat since Boston. When Eastbridge froze her accounts and the scandal hit, her employment records became toxic. She'd lost her sponsor, lost her stability. It had taken years of careful paperwork, legal aid clinics, and relentless study to get back into an academic program that could keep her in the country. The internship at Wexler Meridian wasn't just a line on a resume. It was her bridge. And bridges collapse fast when powerful people decide you don't deserve to cross. That's why Grant's secrecy deal mattered. It wasn't just about embarrassment or gossip. It was survival. Aisha tried to keep her distance from Grant, even after they shook hands as partners. Not because she didn't respect him, but because she understood the danger of attachment. Grant Wexler was a storm warning, remember? Storms destroy things near them, even things they didn't mean to, and yet, the longer they were together, the harder it became to pretend the connection between them was only strategic. The first sign came on a quiet Thursday night. They were reviewing a set of cross-border wires when Aisha's laptop froze, and frustration flashed across her face. Grant, sitting across the table, didn't mock her the way old Grant would have mocked anyone. He simply reached over, rebooted the system, and slid her a fresh mug of tea without a word. "What?" Aisha asked, suspicious. Grant shrugged. "You haven't eaten." "I can tell." Aisha stared at him. "You can tell because you've been watching me." He met her gaze without flinching. "Yes." The honesty made her chest tighten. She looked away, focusing on the screen. "Stop," she said quietly. Grant didn't argue. He only said, "Fine, then start taking care of yourself, and I won't need to." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was real. Meanwhile, inside Wexel Meridian, Ethan Carver did not stop digging. Even after Grant warned him, Ethan's suspicion didn't disappear. It sharpened. He didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in risk mitigation. And in his mind, Aisha was risk wearing a borrowed name. He began turning small screws. An unexpected policy review. A sudden request for consultant logs. A routine inquiry about external access permissions. All packaged as compliance. Grant blocked him every time. But every block alerted Ethan that he was right about one thing. There was something Grant didn't want him to see. Aisha noticed a shift in office energy almost immediately. In hallways, conversations paused when she walked by. In meetings, people asked her to repeat her points even when she'd been clear, a subtle way to test whether she'd break. She didn't break. She had learned long ago that breaking was what they wanted. But one afternoon, the pressure became personal. Aisha arrived for an essential in-person meeting and found Ethan waiting outside Grant's office, like a guard dog. He held a folder in his hand. "Ms. Shah," he said. Aisha stopped. "Mr. Carver." Ethan's voice stayed polite. "We need to update your contractor verification. Standard procedure." Aisha's pulse kicked up. Grant didn't mention that. "Grant is busy," Ethan replied. "This is between you and compliance." Aisha stared at him for 1 second too long. "Say what you mean," she said softly. Ethan's eyes flickered. "I mean that the company cannot be exposed to hidden liabilities. And I mean," Aisha said, voice calm, "that you're looking for a reason to remove me." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "If you're legitimate, you have nothing to worry about." Aisha leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "People said that to me right before they ruined my life." For the first time, Ethan hesitated. Then he cleared his throat, signed the forms. Aisha took the papers, walked into Grant's office, and closed the door behind her with shaking hands. Grant looked up immediately. "What happened?" Aisha handed him the folder without speaking. Grant read it. His jaw tightened. He stood. He didn't call Ethan on the phone. He opened the door and spoke loud enough for the corridor to hear. "Ethan," he said, voice flat. Ethan stepped closer, composed. "Grant." "Touch your paperwork again without my permission," Grant said, "and you're done." Ethan's eyebrows lifted. "Grant, this is standard." "It's not standard," Grant cut in. "It's a power play." Ethan's expression hardened. "I'm protecting this company." Grant's voice dropped lower, sharper. "You're protecting your ego. Get back to your desk." Ethan held Grant's gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and walked away. The silence that followed felt like the moment after lightning, when you realize the thunder is still coming. Aisha shut the office door and leaned against it. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Grant's eyes softened, a fraction. "Yes, I did." Aisha swallowed. "Why?" Grant stared at her like he was making a decision he couldn't undo. "Because when they did it to you before," he said quietly, "nobody stood between you and the machine." Aisha's throat tightened. "Don't," she said, meaning, "don't make me feel things I can't afford." Grant took a step back, giving her space. "Fine," he said. "Then don't thank me. Just stay." Stay. It was a simple word. It felt like a promise. While Wexel Meridian tightened his internal defenses, Eastbridge tightened its external hunt. Lucas Eastman didn't approve that Ines was Aisha, but his instincts kept screaming that she was close. So he escalated. He used his connections to pull travel manifests from the gala. He paid a private security firm to monitor who Grant met with. He tasked his internal IT team to look for unusual queries, any searches related to old compliance archives, any retrieval of documents from 3 years ago. One morning, Aisha and Grant found the first sign that they weren't as invisible as they thought. Grant's head of cyber came into his office with a pale face. "Mr. Wexler," she said, "we've detected targeted intrusion attempts. Not on our main systems. On isolated contractor endpoints." Grant's gaze snapped to Aisha. Aisha's blood cooled. "On mine?" she asked. The cyber lead nodded. "Someone tried to brute force an encrypted folder on your work machine. They failed, but the intent was clear." Aisha's hands clenched. "They're trying to get inside my identity." Grant's voice turned steel. "Lock everything down. Rotate keys. Put her devices behind a new firewall tunnel. And I want a sweep of all physical access logs for the last 2 weeks." The cyber lead nodded and left. Aisha exhaled shakily. "This is why I didn't want to be connected to you." Grant turned to her. "No, this is why we can't stop. If they're reaching for you, it means they're scared." Aisha stared. "Or it means they're about to attack." Grant's eyes didn't soften. "Then we hit first. Harder." That was Grant's nature. Not cruelty. Strategy. The belief that power should be used. Because if you didn't use it, someone else would. And Aisha, after years of being powerless, felt the dangerous allure of that belief. But they still needed one more thing, a witness. Someone inside Eastbridge who could corroborate the chain of manipulation, not just the documents. Because documents could be called fabricated. Witnesses were harder to erase. Aisha's mind returned to one person she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Her former research assistant at Eastbridge, J. Kim. A quiet, brilliant analyst who used to triple-check her models and correct her mistakes without making her feel small. He had been loyal, and after the scandal, he'd been transferred to Eastbridge's London satellite office. A convenient exile. Grant pulled up the file on his screen. "Still employed," he said. "Still underpaid. Still passed over." Aisha's stomach tightened. "If we contact him, they might be monitoring him." Grant nodded. "So we don't contact him like amateurs." They arranged a conference invite, a public finance webinar about risk models. Aisha registered under a neutral alias. Grant's team made sure the platform they used had end-to-end encrypted private messaging. During the webinar, Aisha watched the participant list. Her heart beat like it wanted to escape her chest. Then she saw the name, J. Kim. She almost didn't message him. Almost. But then she remembered what it felt like to be alone, framed, and abandoned by a world that didn't care. So she typed 5 words. "I am alive. Need help." The reply came 10 minutes later. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Aisha stared at the screen. Tears blurred the letters. She hadn't cried in years. Not because she was strong. Because she trained herself to be dry, like a desert, so nothing could grow. Grant watched her face. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. Aisha swallowed and typed. "I can't explain. Meet tomorrow. Encrypted call. 9 p.m. London time." Jay replied, "Yes." The next day, At the exact time, Jay's face appeared on a secure video feed. He looked older, tired, like someone who had learned the cost of staying quiet. "Aisha?" he whispered, as if the name itself was dangerous. Aisha nodded, throat tight. "Yes." Jay's eyes shone with shock and relief. "I thought you were gone." They tried. Aisha said. Grant leaned into frame. "Mr. Kim, I'm Grant Wexler." Jay went rigid. "I know who you are." "Good," Grant said. "Then you know I don't do this for charity. I do it because I hate predators." Jay swallowed. "They're watching, aren't they?" Aisha nodded. "We suspect it." Jay exhaled slowly, then talked fast. Aisha told him everything. The partnership trap, the gal extraction, the evidence. Jay listened, face tightening. "When you were framed," Jay said finally, voice shaking, I saw something." Aisha's breath caught. "What?" Jay hesitated, eyes darting off-screen as if listening for footsteps. "I saw Lucas in compliance room," he said, "the day before the raid. He wasn't supposed to be there." Grant's eyes sharpened. "Can you prove it?" Jay nodded slowly. "There's a security log and a camera feed, but it's internal, restricted." Aisha's voice cracked. "Jay, can you get it?" Jay looked down. "If I try, they'll know. They'll destroy me." Grant's voice turned calm and deadly. "They already have. They just haven't told you yet." Jay's face crumpled for a moment. Then something hardened in it. "I'm tired," he whispered. "I'm tired of being quiet while they kill careers." Aisha reached toward the camera instinctively, as if she could touch him through the screen. "We'll protect you," she said. Grant nodded. "We can relocate you. Legal protection, financial protection, whatever you need." Jay's eyes met theirs. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." For 3 days they waited, and those 3 days were the longest of Aisha's life. Because waiting is torture when you've lived through betrayal. Every hour felt like a countdown. On the 4th day, at 2:13 a.m., Aisha's secure phone buzzed. A message from Jay, sent through a dead drop link. "Got it. They noticed something. I'm leaving London tonight." Attached, a file. A security log with Lucas Eastman's access badge used in compliance archives at 1:07 a.m. the night before the raid. And a grainy still image from a hallway camera. Lucas's profile, leaning into the compliance room, shoulders tense, as if he knew he was doing something that could ruin someone. Aisha covered her mouth. Grant's hand landed on her shoulder. "Now," Grant said quietly, "we have a witness, a log, and a face." Jay Kim disappeared from London that night. Eastbridge filed a missing employee notice. Their internal channels lit up with panic. And for the first time, the predators looked like prey. Because people like Harold and Lucas relied on one thing, that everyone they hurt would stay isolated. Quiet, scared. Aisha was no longer alone. And isolation was their strongest weapon. With Jay in protective custody, Grant's legal team moved faster. They coordinated with investigators to ensure Jay's testimony could be formally recorded under protection. They verified metadata. They built a timeline that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. Meanwhile, Eastbridge tried to strike back. A smear article appeared online, anonymously posted, claiming that Grant Wexler was harboring a disgraced former analyst under a false identity and using her to sabotage a competitor. The article named no one, but it carried enough details to make the industry whisper. On the same day, a federal regulator called Grant's office requesting clarification on his recent hiring of external consultants. It was a fishing expedition, triggered by Eastbridge pressure. Grant didn't flinch. He sent back a letter signed by 3 attorneys and 1 former federal judge on his legal advisory board. Then he called in a favor with a senator he'd once helped fundraise for, not to corrupt justice, to keep it from being corrupted against them. When you fight people like Eastbridge, you learn quickly the law is only clean when someone powerful insists it stays clean. Aisha watched Grant make calls that shifted the air around them. She hated how effective it was. She also understood it. "Is this who you are?" she asked one night, exhausted. "A man who wins because he knows how to pull strings?" Grant looked at her for a long moment. I win because I prepare, he said. Strings exist whether we like them or not. Predators pull them in the dark. I pull them into the light. Aisha stared at him. There was arrogance in him. Yes, but there was something else too. Responsibility. The way power could be used as a shield, not just a sword. That night, after hours of reviewing records, Aisha leaned back and laughed softly, surprising herself. What? Grant asked. Aisha shook her head. It's just, if someone told me 3 years ago that my path to clear my name would involve a billionaire CEO, a museum gala, and a London analyst escaping in the middle of the night. Grant's mouth twitched. You'd call it unrealistic. Aisha nodded. I'd call it a story. Grant's eyes softened. Maybe the universe owes you a story where you win. Aisha's laugh faded. Her gaze dropped to the table, to the photos and logs and pieces of a life that had been shattered and slowly reassembled. What if we still lose? She whispered. Grant reached across the table and took her hand. His touch wasn't possessive now. It was steady. Then we lose together, he said. But we don't lose quietly. Aisha held his gaze. In that moment, she realized the danger wasn't only the Eastman's. It was the way she wanted to believe him, the way she wanted to let herself rest against someone strong, because believing was risk, and yet she was tired of living without it. The indictment didn't happen overnight. Justice rarely does. But when it came like a dam breaking. Investigators executed warrants. They seized devices. They interviewed former employees. They traced the shell companies Aisha had discovered years ago. Only now, the trail couldn't be buried under her name, because her name was no longer the only name on the paper. Harold Eastman tried to deny everything in public statements. Lucas tried to paint Aisha as a bitter ex, using a billionaire to take revenge. They tried to turn the story into drama. Grant turned it into data. He released an investor letter that didn't accuse, it documented. Timelines, compliance failures, conflicts of interest, Aisha's evidence, translated into language that courts and regulators respected. And that's when more voices came out. One by one, people who had been waiting for someone powerful enough to be believed first. A former compliance officer, a burned-out trader, a junior analyst who admitted she'd been ordered to alter logs. The machine that had crushed Aisha began eating itself. And finally, the day came when federal agent arrived at East Bridge's headquarters with cameras already waiting outside. Aisha didn't celebrate immediately. She couldn't. Trauma doesn't release you that easily. But she stood beside Grant in his office and watched the news. Lucas Eastman was let out in cuffs, his perfect smile gone, his eyes darting like a man who couldn't believe the world had turned on him. Harold Eastman followed, slower, face hard, the look of someone who still believed he could talk his way out of gravity. Aisha's chest rose and fell, shallow. Grant watched her carefully. How do you feel? He asked again, softer this time. Aisha stared at the screen, then at her own hands that had once shaken so badly she couldn't hold a pen. I feel, she searched for a word. Not fixed, she said, but free. Grant nodded. That's enough. Aisha turned to him. And you, she asked. You could have ignored me. You could have walked away. Why didn't you? Grant exhaled slowly, like the truth was heavier than any business deal. Because you reminded me what power is for, he said. I built an empire and spent years watching people lie and smile while they hurt others. Then you walked into that dinner as an intern and refused to be small. Aisha's throat tightened. And, Grant added, the slightest hint of humor returning, because you embarrass me, and I don't like losing. Aisha laughed through the sting in her eyes. You're unbelievable. Grant stepped closer. His voice lowered. No, he said, I'm finally believable, because you forced me to be. There are moments when two people stand at the edge of a new life, not because everything is perfect, because something broke open. Aisha looked at Grant, the arrogant billionaire who had asked her for investment advice with a side of sparkling water, and the same man who had put his resources between her and the machine that tried to erase her. Without thinking too hard, she stepped closer, not because she needed saving, because she wanted connection. Grant didn't move first. He waited, like he was giving her the choice, like he understood consent in a world that often ignored it. Aisha lifted her chin. Grant's hand touched her cheek, gentle, almost disbelieving. Then he kissed her, slow at first, as if testing whether the moment was real. Aisha kissed back, and 3 years of fear and loneliness loosened their grip. When they finally separated, both of them breathed like they'd run a mile. Grant's forehead rested lightly against hers. "I should apologize," he murmured. "For what?" Aisha whispered. "For underestimating you," he said. "For the joke. For everything." Aisha smiled, shaky and bright. "Don't apologize," she said. "Just don't go back to being that guy." Grant's mouth twitched. "I can't promise perfection." "I'm not asking for perfection," Aisha said. "I'm asking for truth." Grant nodded once. "Then we start there. And if you're still watching, comment this. Would you have spoken up? Because that's what changed everything. Not Grant's billions. Not his lawyers. Not the gala. Not the evidence. One sentence from an intern who refused to be invisible. And that's how the most powerful CEO in the room became speechless, because the smallest person in the room finally spoke. Weeks later, the world tried to treat the story like entertainment. Financial news panels debated it like it was a case study. Podcasts turned it into a rise and fall episode with dramatic music. Anonymous accounts posted hot takes. She should have just stayed quiet. She got lucky. She used him. He's only helping because he wants her. And if you've ever been underestimated, you know how infuriating that is. Because when a woman fights for her name, strangers love to rewrite the reason. Aisha didn't give them the satisfaction. She didn't do a victory interview. She didn't sit under studio lights and cry for a clip. She did something harder. She went to court. The first hearing was in Boston. Aisha hadn't stepped foot in that city since the day she ran. The night before, she barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the worst moments. The raid. The whispers in hallways. The look on Lucas's face as he called her a criminal and held her hand like a lover. The moment her bank card declined. The day her visa lawyer told her the words no immigrant ever wants to hear. "We need to prepare for removal proceedings." Grant offered to fly with her on his private jet. Aisha refused. "If I'm walking back into that city," she said, "I'm walking in like myself, not like luggage." So they took a commercial flight. Grant sat beside her in coach without complaint. Hoodie pulled up, cap low. No cameras. No flex. Just presence. In Boston, the courthouse air smelled like old paper and cold marble. Aisha wore a simple suit. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed Billionaire's ally. Because she wasn't trying to win with optics. She was trying to win with truth. Inside the courtroom, she saw familiar faces. Former colleagues, reporters, people who had avoided her when the scandal broke. Some looked guilty. Some looked curious. Some looked like they still want to believe the original narrative. Because admitting they were wrong would mean admitting they had helped destroy someone innocent. Lucas sat at the defense table, jaw tight, eyes darting. When he saw her, something flashed, rage, shock, and a flicker of fear. Because for the first time, she wasn't disappearing. She was standing. Harold sat beside him, composed, still wearing the expression of a man who believed consequences were for others. He didn't look at Aisha. Not once. When Aisha took the stand, her hands trembled for exactly 3 seconds. Then she remembered something her mother used to say back home. "Your voice shakes when it's been locked up. Keep speaking. It will learn freedom." So she spoke. She told the story from the beginning, not as a victim, as a timeline. She explained how she found the irregularities, how she raised a concern, how Lucas asked for time, how the raid happened the next morning, how documents appeared with her credentials, how her visa collapsed, how she became a headline, then a ghost. The prosecutor played the audio recording. Harold's voice filled the courtroom. "She knows too much." Lucas's voice followed. "I'll handle Aisha." Aisha didn't react. She didn't cry. She didn't look at Lucas. She stared straight ahead, letting the words hang for everyone to hear. When the judge ordered a recess, the courtroom broke into whispers. Reporters moved like sharks. Aisha stood, breathing slowly. Grant walked beside her, one hand hovering near her back, not touching unless she leaned into it. He didn't speak for her. He never did. Outside, a reporter shouted, "Aisha, do you forgive them?" Aisha stopped. She turned, eyes steady. "Forgiveness isn't the point," she said. "Accountability is." Then she walked away. That line made headlines. And for once, they quoted her accurately. After the hearing, Aisha expected relief. Instead, she felt raw, as if reopening the wound had made it bleed again, even though the infection was finally being cleaned out. Back in Chicago, she returned to work, not as an anonymous consultant. Grant offered to reveal her identity internally, to give her a title that matched her talent. Aisha hesitated, not from fear, from caution. "If we reveal me," she said, "we do it on my terms." Grant nodded. "Always." So they planned it. On a Monday morning, Grant called an all-hands meeting. Thousands of employees joined, analysts, engineers, assistants, interns. Faces filled screens like a mosaic. Grant stood at the stage, calm, confident. The company expected a market update, a new product, a merger announcement, something corporate. Instead, Grant said, "I owe someone an apology." The room went silent. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't perform humility. He told the truth. "A few months ago," he said, "I mocked an intern at a dinner because I thought power gave me permission to entertain myself. I was wrong." Aisha stood in the wings, heart pounding. Her palms were sweaty, not because she feared the room, because she feared how much this moment mattered. Grant continued, "That intern, now a consultant, saved this company from a fraud my team missed. She also reminded me that talent doesn't always wear the suit we expect." He gestured. Aisha walked onto the stage. The camera feed zoomed. People murmured. Some recognized her. Many didn't. Grant stepped back, giving her the center, not as a prop, as a person. Aisha looked out at the sea of faces. She thought of the interns sitting in tiny apartments, wondering if they belonged. She thought of immigrants who swallowed their intelligence to sound acceptable. She thought of the version of herself who had once believed silence would keep her safe. She took a breath. "My name is Aisha Rahman," she said. "I used to be an analyst. I was framed. I ran. I hid. I rebuilt. And I'm standing here now because one day I decided that being invisible wasn't protecting me. It was burying me." She paused, letting it land. "If you're an intern," she continued, "and you feel small in this world, I need you to hear this. Your value is not measured by who looks at you. It's measured by what you can see." She smiled slightly. "And if someone in power asks you for a joke, don't be afraid to answer seriously." The room erupted. Applause, reactions, messages. Not because it was a speech, because it was a crack in the old culture. Afterward, Ethan Carver approached Aisha, quietly. He looked tired, like suspicion had drained him. "I was wrong," he said. Aisha studied him. He had helped the machine by questioning her, but he had also done it from fear, not malice. Fear of risk, fear of being blindsided. "I don't need you to like me," Aisha said. "I need you to protect the truth when it's inconvenient." Ethan nodded once. "I will," he said. It wasn't friendship. It was a shift. And sometimes that's the real victory, not revenge, but change. That night, on Grant's balcony, the city lights looked softer. Aisha stood with a mug of tea, wind tugging at her hair. Grant stood beside her, hands in pockets. "You were incredible today," he said. Aisha exhaled slowly. "I was terrified." Grant glanced at her. "You didn't show it." Aisha smiled. "That's called trauma management." Grant laughed once, then grew quiet. "I keep thinking about the first time I met you," he admitted. "At that dinner. I thought I was the smartest person in the room." Aisha tilted her head. "You usually are." Grant's mouth twitched. "Not that night." Aisha looked at him, expression softening. "And what did you see?" she asked. Grant stared at the city. I saw someone who didn't beg for permission to be intelligent, he said, and it made me realize how tired I was of the games. Aisha's chest tightened. What now? She asked. Grant turned toward her. Now, he said, we build something better. Together, if you want. Aisha studied him for a long moment. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just a man who had learned, painfully, that power was empty without integrity. I want, she said quietly, but we do it my way. Grant's eyes warmed. Deal. Aisha stepped closer. This time, she kissed him first, not because she needed protection, because she chose connection. And if you made it all the way to the end, here's the final question. What would you do if the most powerful person in the room mocked you and gave you a microphone? Would you shrink or would you speak? Comment your answer. And if you want more stories like this, where courage wins and truth fights back, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.